Hello guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. So in this video we are going to look at genetics, which is a grade 12 topic. So by definition, genetics is defined as the study about the mechanisms, the transfer of genes and expression, or we can just say the study about heredity, right? So let's come to the terms which are used under genetics. So when you're learning about genetics, you need to be aware of these terms. Okay, so let me start with the inheritance. So when you say inheritance, what does it mean? So to inherit is to get something, okay? It is just to get something. Now, when you talk of genetics, see, we are going to consider this inheritance as the transfer of genes from the parents to their offsprings. So the transfer of genes from the parents to their offsprings. Now, when you talk of offsprings, these are just daughter cells or children's. Right, so the way you look, your complexity in a simpler ways, came from your parents, from both of your parents. So the way you look or the way you are composed of, the informations were transferred in form of what? Genes. So I'm saying inheritance is just the transfer of genes from the parents to their offsprings or offspring. Yeah. Now, in this one we have the term which is the gene. So you need to understand what a gene is. Yes. So now when you talk of a gene, this one it is just the unit of inheritance. Right, so we are saying it's just the unit of inheritance. So when you talk of inheritance, this one is just the transfer of genes from the parents to their offsprings or offspring. Now, on part of the gene as the units of inheritance, what does it mean? So immediately I like something like 2 meters. What comes in your mind? Which means you are going to say, here we are talking about what? Length or distance. Which means, when you talk of genes, which means the genes are just going to represent the what? The inheritance itself. That's why we are saying a gene or genes, these are just units of inheritance. Right. So let's come to the alleles. When you talk of alleles, these are just alternate forms of genes. The alternate form of genes. Right, so the alternate form of genes is called alleles or allele. Okay, now what you need to know here is that alleles, they go in pairs and they are represented by letters. Okay, so alleles are represented by letters. In short, you can use any letter from the alphabetical order to represent the what? The alleles. Now, I'm saying alleles, they go in pairs. So let's try to look at the examples. So as you can see, these are pairs of alleles. Okay. Now I'm saying alleles are represented by letters or any letter. I'm not saying always we use A. No. They can give you W, X, and so on. Right. So we have this one, which is the allele or the alleles. Even these are called alleles because they are in pairs, and also these are called alleles. Right, so let's try to look at the next term which you are going to find in an exam, which is the phenotype. So when you talk about the phenotype, this one is just an outward appearance of a living organism, an outward appearance of a living organism. So when you say an outward appearance of a living organism, what does it mean? So like the way I'm recording this video, if you see me, you're going to identify that I am a male just by looking my outward appearance, okay? Yes. So when you talk about the phenotype, this one is just represented by words. For example, so the first one we have mother. So this one is just an outward appearance, okay? So if you see a female, you're going to identify that this one is the mother. That one is just an outward appearance, okay? And also father. Father, it is an example of phenotype, okay? Followed by the black bull. So you can know that this one, it is just a black male cattle, okay? Then we also have white cow. So this one is going to symbolize that this one is just a white cattle, which is the female one. Then the tall tree, which means this one, it is just a tall tree, okay? Yeah. So let's move on to the next one. So the next one is genotype. So when you talk of genotype, this one, it is just the internal or genetic appearance of a living organism, right? So let's say the examples that I've given you, you identify that this one is the mother. Now, are you going to know the genetic, the internal or the genetic appearance of this mother? You're not going to know, okay? Because this one is just internally. You can't know that this mother is having blood group B or blood group A. You can't know, or blood group O. You can't know. That one is what? The genetic appearance, right? So it is just the genetic or internal appearance of a living organism. Okay. So now, likewise, I was saying you can't know if you see a male, you're going to identify that this one is the father, but you can't know the genetic, the internal composition. You can't know. Okay. Yes. Now, one thing that you need to know here is that as for the genotype or genotypes are represented by alleles. Now remember, alleles are represented by what? Letters, which means genotypes are represented by letters. Since alleles are represented by letters, okay? And I'm saying genotype or genotypes are represented by alleles. And here I'm from saying alleles are represented by what? Letters. So in this case here, as for genotypes, you are supposed to use letters. Don't just words like this, okay? Yes. An example, it is A and also capital letter A and small letter A. This one is going to be an example of an allele, but this one, it is the genotype. So in an exam, if they say, write the genotype of this and this one, you're supposed to use the what? The letters, right? Now, let's say this one is our example. This one is the black bull, and this one is the white cow. So to write the genotype of this black bull, and they are saying we need to use capital letter B, and in this case, as for the white cow, we need to use capital letter W. As for the black bull, we are going to use capital letter B and also capital letter B. Since alleles, they go in pairs, so we need to use the capital letters. Now, as for the white cow, we need to use capital letter W and also capital letter W to represent the genotype of the white cow. Since you have understood the definition of the phenotype, which is the outward appearance of a living organism, and as for the genotype, this one is just the genetic or internal appearance of a living organism. And I'm saying, as for genotypes, they are just represented by what? Alleles, and alleles are represented by what? Letters. Now, let's come to the dominant allele or the dominant gene. So when you say dominant allele or dominant gene, what does it mean? So this one is just the allele which overshadow the other allele in the phenotype. Okay, so let's say, for example, if the complexity of your mother, it is brown, then the complexity of your father, it is black. You're going to find that if your mother is having dominant genes, which means as for you, you are going also to look what? Brown. What I mean about this one, since we have talked about the alleles, which are alternate forms of genes, and alleles are represented by the letters, okay? So now when you talk of the dominant gene, a dominant gene is represented by capital letter, okay? A dominant gene is represented by what? A capital letter, N letter. Now, let's say, for example, if we have W, when you talk of dominant gene, which means you are going to use capital letter W. If you have a dominant allele as Y, you are going to use capital letter Y. And if you have a dominant value as B, which means you are going to use capital letter what? B. So in short, dominant values, these are just values which overshadow the recessive value in the phenotype. Right. So an example, let's say we have A as our value. Now we are talking about the dominant value, which means on this part here we can have capital letter A and also small letter what? M. That's the what? The dominant value. Apart from this one, we can also have capital letter A and also capital letter M. So these are dominant values. Now, this one, small letter A, it is not the dominant value. This one is called the recessive value. Remember that a dominant value is represented by a capital letter. And when you're writing the values, you need to start with the dominant value, right? Remember that when you are writing the genotype, you need to start with the dominant value, which is represented by a capital letter. So in this case here, we are starting with capital letter A and ending with small letter what? M. If you write this one as small letter A and capital letter M, that one is going to be wrong. So in writing the genotypes, you need to start with the dominant value and end with the recessive value. Now, I'm saying as for the dominant value, it is just the value which overshadowed the recessive value in the phenotype. So an example, if you have something like capital letter B and small letter B, which one here is the dominant value? The dominant value here, it is what? It is B, which means this B is going to express itself on the phenotype. So, when you talk of small letter B, this one is going to be now a recessive value. So let's come to the recessive value now. So don't forget that the dominant value expresses itself in the phenotype. And remember, the phenotype is just the outward appearance of a living organism. And genotype, we use what? We use values. Okay? Yes. Let me just repeat. I'm saying, when you talk of the dominant value, this one is just the value which expresses itself in the phenotype. So when you talk of the phenotype, this one is just an outward appearance of a living organism, right? And genotype, it is just the internal or the genetic appearance of a living organism. Now let's come to the recessive value. So a recessive value, this one it is just the value which is overshadowed in the phenotype. So this one is just the value which is overshadowed in the phenotype. And what you need to know here is that as for recessive values, or a recessive value is represented by a small letter. Let's say, for example, if you have a recessive value of A, which means you are going to use small letter what? M, right? So now, since I'm saying a recessive value is the value which is overshadowed in the phenotype, so which means when you say overshadowed, which means you're not going to see it in the phenotype. An example, let's say if your mother is brown in color and your father is black in color, if the genes from your mother are recessive and the genes from your father are dominant, which means you are going to appear black in color, but you're not going to take the brown from your mother because they are all recessive. Yeah. So now let's come to, and one thing that you need to know here is that Dominant allele are represented by capital letters like this, and we can say B and small letter b like this. Another one, capital letter A, small letter a, capital letter A, and capital letter A. These are qualified to be, the capital letters are qualified to be the dominant alleles or dominant genes. Now, let's come to the recessive. As for recessive, we use small letters. So in this case here, it is small letter A. Whenever you see a small letter, which means that one is going to represent a what? A recessive. So in this case here, in an exam, if they say a recessive mother was close with the dominant father, so you need to know what you need to know what they are talking about. So when they say a dominant father, which means you are going to use capital letters for that one. And if they say a recessive mother, you are going to use what? Small letters for that one. So let's come to the homozygous dominant and also homozygous recessive. So to bring you back, when you talk of dominant, I've talked about this one. Dominant alleles are represented by what? Capital letters, B or A and so on. And recessive alleles are represented by what? Small letters. We can just say small letter B or small letter A, like that. Now, since here we have homo, which means same. Homo means what? Same. So when you talk of homozygous dominant, so these are just what? The alleles with same letters. They are just what? Alleles with same letters. So now when you talk of homozygous dominant, and here I was saying dominant alleles are represented by what? Capital letters. So when you say homozygous dominant, and dominant alleles are represented by capital letters. And remember I was saying alleles, they go in pairs. So in an exam, if they say the homozygous dominant mother, now if they have given you B, which means you are going to say capital letter B and another capital letter B. So when you see something like this one is going to tell you that this one, it is the homozygous dominant. This one is dominant and also this one is dominant. So when you say homo means what? Same. So they have equal expression, okay, in the phenotype. They have equal expression in the phenotype. Now, apart from B, they can also give you A, which means you can just say capital letter A and also capital letter A. This one is going to be what? Homozygous dominant, because this one is dominant and this one is dominant, and homo means what? Same. So this one is homozygous dominant. Let's come to homozygous recessive. Homozygous recessive. So homo means what? Same. And remember, recessive alleles are represented by what? Small letters, and homo means same, which means if they have given you B as the recessive allele, which means you are going to say it is small letter B and small letter B, or if you have been given A, which means you are going to say small letter A and small letter A. Or if they have given you D, you are going to say small letter D and small letter D. So this one is representing what? The homozygous recessive, and this one also homozygous recessive. Remember, a recessive allele is represented by what? A small letter, and a dominant allele is represented by a capital letter. Homo means what? Same, which means you are going to have same recessive alleles, like that. So let's come to heterozygous. So now when you talk of heterozygous dominant, so let me start with heterozygous dominant. When you say hetero, which means different, okay? Hetero means different. Now, dominant. So which means you are going to have, remember, a dominant gene is represented by what? Capital letters. Now, hetero means what? Different. So you are going to have different letters. So in this case, you can have capital letter B and small letter what? Let me say capital letter B and capital letter what? W. These are different letters. Hetero, different letters. Dominant, they are represented by what? Capital letters. So you are going to find that if I combine these two, it is going to be like capital letter B and capital letter W. So B is representing black and W is representing what? White. So in this case here, both of them are dominant to each other. So we say they exist as heterozygous dominant. They exist as what? Heterozygous dominant in this case here. Right. So let's come to heterozygous recessive. Heterozygous recessive. So in this case here, when you talk about the heterozygous recessive, you are going to have, so now let me also clarify on this part here. So I've said, when you say heterozygous dominant, you can have different letters like this one, which is B, capital B, and capital W. So when you combine these two, you're going to have BW. So both are dominant to each other. But you can also have something like small letters. Let me say you can also have something like same letters, but they should be different. So they should be what? Different from each other. So this one is dominant, and this one is what? Recessive. So they are not the same. This one is recessive, this one is what? Dominant. So this one, when we combine these two, we are going to have capital letter B and small letter what? B in this case. Remember that always when you're writing the alleles or when you're writing the genotype, you need to start with the dominant allele, and then at the end, you end with the recessive allele. Now, this one is called the heterozygous dominant, okay? This one is called the heterozygous dominant. Now, when it comes to heterozygous recessive, here you are going to find that you can have something like small letter A and small letter B. You can have something like small letter A and small letter B. Since recessive alleles are represented by small letters, so when we combine these two, we are going to have A and B. Remember, these are not same letters, so you can't call these as homozygous recessive. No, these are heterozygous recessive. Recessive alleles are represented by small letters, and these are two different, okay? So when you combine them, we are going to get what? The heterozygous recessive in this case here, right? So you can't, on this part here, you can't have something like A, capital letter A and small letter A, which means this one is just representing the heterozygous dominant, which is this part here. So in this case here, A is dominant, which is capital letter A, and small letter A is recessive. That's all. So remember that when you talk of heterozygous dominant, you are going to have different letters, but small letters. Let me say, you are going to have different letters, and those must be small letters. Let's say you have T and X. These are different letters. So these, they exist as heterozygous recessive. So now let's try to look at the next one. So I have written something here. This one is representing the dominant allele. So as for the dominant, when you talk of homozygous dominant, they are going to use capital letters, which are the same letters. Then the recessive alleles, you are going to use same letters but small letters. Then as for the heterozygous dominant, you are going to use different letters, and they must be capital letters, okay? Then when you talk of heterozygous recessive, you are going to use small letters, and they must be different letters, okay? They must be different from each other. Now, let's come to the gametes. So we have the male gamete and the female gamete. So we have the male gamete and also the female gamete. So the male gamete, it is called the sperm. Then the female gamete, it is called the ovum. Now, you need to know the chromosomes which are contained in these gametes. So as for the sperm, it has the gamete of XY, right? So the sperm, it has the chromosomes of XY. Then as for the ovum, it has the chromosomes of X and X. Now, where are these coming from? These are coming from the types of chromosomes. We have two types of chromosomes. We have the X chromosome and the Y chromosome. So let me repeat, I'm saying we have two types of chromosomes. We have the X chromosome and the Y chromosome. Now, the sperm consists of the X chromosome and the Y chromosome. Then as for the female, which is the ovum, it consists of the X chromosome and the X chromosome. So in this case here, whenever you see XY, this one it is going to represent what? A male, because sperms are only found where? In males. You can't find sperms in females. So whenever you see something like XY, which means they are talking about the female. Let me say they are talking about the male. Okay, so which means they are talking about the male. And when you see something like X and X, which is X chromosome and X chromosome, which means they are talking about what? The female. Now, you're going to find that the chances of having the boy child and the girl child are equal. The chances of having a boy child and a girl child are equal. Now let's prove that. Since this one is representing the male and this one is representing the what? The female. And these, they are like alleles. And remember, the genotype or genotypes are represented by what? The alleles. So let's try to draw the genetic diagram for the production of these offspring. Since I'm saying the chances of having the boy child and the chances of having a girl child are equal, which means it is 50% to 50%. You can't tell that I'm going to have a boy child, and you can't tell that I'm going to have a girl child during fertilization. Right, so let's try to draw the genetic diagram. Now, since here we have two things, so the first thing, you're supposed to start with what? The phenotype, which is the outward appearance of a living organism. The phenotype. So under phenotype, we have the mother and also the father. So let me start with the father. The father being closed. So let's have the father being closed with the mother. So this one is the phenotype, okay? So the father is being closed with the mother. Then the next step, when you're drawing the genetic diagram, the next step is the genotype. So when it comes to the genotype, this one is just the genetic or internal appearance of a living organism. And genotypes are represented by what? Alleles. And alleles are represented by what? Letters. Now, we have talked of the chromosomes for the father, which is the male, and the chromosomes for the mother, which is the female. So as for the father, we use X and Y. Then as for the mother, we use XX. Okay, so after the genotype, what follows next is the gametes. You're going to split the gametes. When you say splitting the gametes, they are going to be separated. Here they are paired, but when it comes to the gametes, here we are going to split them. So this one is going to be independent as X, and this Y here is going to be also independent as Y. Then this X is going to be independent as X, and also this X is going to be independent as X, like that. So what next here is random fertilization. So what follows next here, it is random fertilization or random assortment. So random fertilization. Under random fertilization, you're going to find that the gametes to the father are going to cater with each gamete from the father is going to cater with every gamete from the mother. So in this case here, we are going to have this one, go with this one, and also the same gamete is going to cater with the last gamete for this one. So in this case here, if I combine this X and this X, I'm going to have X. So let me just write here, I'm going to have X and also X, right? Then from there now, if I combine this X here and also this X here, I'm going to have X and also another X for this one. Now let's come to Y. If this Y combine with this X, and also if this Y combine with this X, what is going to be formed? So when I combine X and Y, what I'm going to have here, it is X and Y. And also when I combine this Y and this X here, I'm going to have X, Y. So since these are alleles, and alleles are represented by letters, and in addition we can say the genotypes are represented by alleles, which means this one is going to be the genotype, or we can just say the F1 genotype. So when I say F1, this one is more like the phyla1 genotype. So the first one is this one, which is the phyla1 genotype. Now what follows next? It is the phyla1, which is F1 phenotype. The phenotype. So what follows next is the F1 phenotype. Now, since here we are having XX, and I was saying XX, it is just the chromosomes for a female. So I'm just going to say this one is going to be the female. Then XX is going to be also the female. Then XY, this one is the what? The male. Then XY is going to be the male. So as you can see, here we are having two males, and here we are having two females, which means it is 50% for you to have a female, and it is also 50% for you to have a male. So it is more like 50%, 50%. So you can't tell that you are going to have a male or female during fertilization. I'm saying you can't tell that you are going to have a male or a female during fertilization. Right. So now let's come to the alleles for blood groups. So blood group alleles. So blood groups alleles. Now, before I go to the blood group alleles, let's try to look at the types of blood that we have. So we have blood group. So we have blood group A. We have blood group A. Apart from having blood group A, we also have blood group B. Then apart from blood group B, we also have blood group O. Then apart from blood group O, we also have blood group AB. Okay? So these are blood groups that we have. But when you talk of blood group alleles, we just end here. We just end where? Here. So when you talk of blood group alleles, we only have A, B, and O. Only. Let me repeat, I'm saying. When you talk of blood group alleles, we only have A, B, and O. But when you talk about the blood groups, we have blood group A, B, O, and AB. So from A up to O, these are just blood group alleles, or they are just representing the what? The alleles for blood group. Now, you are going to find that blood group O is homozygous recessive. Okay? Blood group O, it is homozygous recessive. So what it means here is that blood group O can only exist as the homozygous recessive. And you know that homozygous recessive, you are going to have same letters and they must be small letters. Now, let me try to talk about the allele, the specific allele for the blood group. So we use capital letter I to represent the blood group allele. Okay? Then on top, we put now the blood group of the specific person. Okay? So we use capital letter I. In this case here, it is just the pair of capital letter what? I. Now, since here I'm saying blood group O, it is recessive. Blood group O, it is recessive, which means it has no power. It can't be expressed itself in the phenotype, which is the outward appearance of a living organism. Right. So if you talk of blood group O, which means blood group O can only exist as homozygous dominant. That one you need to know. So feel free to pause the video and write the notes about this one here. So I'm saying blood group O can only exist as the homozygous recessive. Recessive alleles are represented by small letters. Okay? So in this case here, blood group O can only, so you can't have blood group O as I, which is capital I to the power A, and capital I to the power O. This one is not blood group O. This one is not blood group O. Blood group O can only exist as homozygous recessive. That's the reason why blood group O, it is the universal donor. Okay? It is the universal what? Donor, because it is homozygous recessive. Anyone with any blood group can, or if someone is having blood group O and another one is having blood group B, if someone who is having blood group B is not having enough blood, the one with blood group O can donate to the blood group B, because blood group O, it is homozygous recessive, or it is recessive. Now let's come to A, blood group A. So we have blood group A, and we are saying as for blood groups, we use capital letter I and also capital letter I. They go in pairs. Now, since we have blood group A, which means on this part here, we are going to have two blood groups, okay? As for blood group A, we can have blood group A as the heterozygous dominant. So do you remember those terms? Heterozygous dominant. So in talk of heterozygous dominant, you are going to have different letters, and one allele should be dominant over the other one. So in this case here, what is dominant here? It is A, and what is recessive here? It is what? It is